Welcome back, everybody, to the Assertive Podcast. I'm Erica.
I'm Jess.
And we are licensed professional counselors in Texas, reviewing Am I the Asshole Reddit threads to help you learn skills for communication, healthy boundary setting, and assertive interpersonal functioning. Today, we are continuing our 6 core emotions discussion, and we are looking at pain. And today, we're going to look at how do we manage our pain and how do we process through painful experiences. We're going to review our Am I the Asshole post, give you a quick update on data points of pain, and then we'll jump in. Our post today is Am I the Asshole for going through my wife's personal belongings?
Our author writes, "My wife Rose was my best friend. We were so comfortable together. I never felt sad, unhappy, or upset when she was there. I also never had butterflies when I was around her. I never got the sense of being in love. I thought that while I loved her, I knew I was never in love with her, like with my exes. I thought I settled for her because we were best friends and I knew she would love and cherish me. She was loving and much more acutely aware of my feelings than I was of my own. I didn't feel in love because I associated love with highs and lows of toxicity that were modeled for me. Comfort, security, safety. Those weren't love as I thought of them. She knew how I felt and she knew how to soothe me from all the tumultuous feelings I had. Sometimes I was looking for issues and had anxiety and dread of something creeping up because it was unfathomable that life could be so good with her. She deserves so much better. I was happy with my life, but I wanted something else. Everything she did started to annoy me, from the way she chewed to the way she laughed. One day, I woke up to go to work and she was still asleep. She had a brain aneurysm and didn't wake up. I felt like my heart was ripped from my chest. I didn't know how much I loved her until she was dead. I didn't realize that what I had with my wife was love, as it was supposed to be, until it was ripped away from me. Rose was a journaler. She would write everything down. I wonder why she had to stop and jot something down when we had places to be. I can't ask her now that she's dead. I went through her diary and her phone too. A horrible, small part of me wondered if she was compensating for something and to show me that she loved me out of guilt. But no, she was even more loving and generous and kind, and she loved me so much. My sister-in-law found out I went through Rose's stuff. She screamed that I had no right to go through her diary. Rose would want her privacy. I yelled that she was dead and wasn't here to say what she wanted. My sister-in-law and my in-laws think it's horribly disrespectful and want me to, quote, return Rose's stuff to them. I don't want to. It's my wife and I miss her so much, and these things help me be close to her. I keep reading her diary and it feels like she is here with me. She's been dead for over a year, but it feels like she'll be back soon. So, am I the asshole?
All right. So, quick recap for pain. Pain's 2 data points is it tells us where our attachments are. And just like physical pain tells us where we need to heal or give some attention to, emotional pain lets us know what emotional wounds we need to pay attention to and what needs some healing. You want to do our polar ends for us, Jess?
Sure. So too much pain is where we get into hopelessness and helplessness. So we talked a little bit about learned helplessness, where over time we just start to assume things are going to go poorly and we stop really putting an effort to get ourselves out of situations. Not enough pain is numbing. This looks like a lot of like escapism. So this is where we often see functions of addiction or distractions coming in. And then over time, we see this numbness extend to kind of all the other emotions to where we just kind of go offline. What about the physical experience of the pain? We both described it as kind of this heaviness. We both have some moving a little bit slower, things feeling more burdensome. We talked about crying, the benefits of crying. So go back. That's good information. If you want to justify crying, episode 1's got a lot of good stuff in there.
I think that's probably the high points for it.
Okay. So we're getting coping now.
Yeah.
Give all this data. One of the first things I wanted to talk about with the coping, I had done a CEU course a little bit ago about grief, and we learned something that I thought was interesting and made a lot of sense that I wanted to share with you guys. So lots of us are familiar with the Kubler-Ross framework for grief. So that's like 5 stages. It's called the DABDA. So that's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So that model was originally made to talk about the process of dealing with chronic illness and like chronic pain. So it wasn't actually developed to be applied to grief. It's kind of a well-known thing. Most people kind of experience something differently. I want to introduce William Worden's 4 tasks of grief. And this is what I use to talk with my clients who have had a loss. So the 4 tasks of grief are acceptance, experiencing pain, adjustment, and then refocusing or integration, as it's called.
Mhm.
So this was a little different because acceptance with this
Comes
task
first.
comes first. So it's like, well, how can I accept something that I'm not really okay with?
Mm.
One of the big parts of this was called like reality checking. This is one of the reasons most cultures have a death ritual. So it's facing this reality. I'm like awake. You are looking at that person and they're dead, right? If you know they're being put in the ground, we're watching their bodies be burned. So it's this kind of reality check to let us know this person is in fact dead. They are not going to come back. This is permanent. So that's kind of like step 1 is attending some kind of memorial service and commemorating the death. Experiencing pain is kind of what we would, I guess, traditionally view as the process of grieving. So that's going to look like, the back and forth, the anger, the sadness. We're going to have a lot of emotions here. This is where depression can come in. Again, all normal parts of grief. There is appropriate times to feel helpless and hopeless if the loss is big enough. Adjustment is starting to think about living life without them. So you're going to start adjusting your lifestyle. You're going to accommodate and fill maybe gaps that they provided for you, kind of reshuffling the deck of whatever needs that they were filling and finding a new place for that. And then refocusing and integration is looking for the future of like, what does this mean now that they're not here anymore? And so the final step is having an idea for your life of what it's going to look like without that person there. So this can look like, a lot of times I'll encourage clients to have like an annual memorial thing that they want to do with the family. That could be honoring a birthday or some kind of ritual that we do to remember that person. A lot of like kind of like rituals and traditions that come in that can be really helpful with the grief loss model too. So that's the model I use for my clients. So again, the four tasks are acceptance, experiencing pain, adjustment, and then refocusing or integration is the final step. Which I never heard of that before that CEU, and I was like, that is pretty helpful, I think, because that feels like closer to what happens, I think, when somebody dies,
It feels like the kind of rational way to go through it. If we look at the old Kubler-Ross framework, if you're in denial, you can't move on with the grieving process.
Yeah.
Right. So grief doesn't really start until you hit acceptance.
Yeah.
Like, how can you grieve something if you're not accepting that they're gone?
And especially when you think about this being applied to chronic pain, like, well, that makes sense.
Yes.
Because like, well, maybe I'll get better, or maybe there's hope, or maybe, whatever. And so sometimes it can take a long time to admit that you're disabled, or that you're going to deal with this for forever. And so it makes perfect sense when we think about it from the chronic pain or illness. But with grief, that's a really good point, that if we're not acknowledging that they're gone, then we haven't really started the process.
Yeah. And even in one of his last lines, and we chatted about this in Pain Part 1, was his last line here. She's been dead for over a year, but it feels like she'll be back soon. So it doesn't sound like he's gotten to acceptance, or if he did, he backslid when he found these journals.
That's exactly what I was saying when I was reading this, and I was like, oh gosh, he's still kind of in step 1.5 a little bit here, because definitely not talking about how he's going to move forward, definitely not talking about what life's going to look like, or he's definitely still in that loss part. Thinking somebody's going to walk back in the door after a year, like, oh boy, it's rough.
Absolutely. I was also, as you were going through the 4 tasks of grief, I was thinking about ambiguous loss, which is when there's perceived loss without confirmation, so missing persons.
Oh, yeah. I think like long-term, like incarceration almost can sometimes be like this.
Where they're gone and the chances of them coming back are probably slim after a certain period of time, statistically.
Yeah.
But without the body or without being able to go through some type of grieving process,
Mm.
it's hard to move on. So I've had clients before where this has been their stuck point. This is the point of their depression. They can't go through the grief process because they haven't gotten to acceptance because there's no confirmed death.
Yeah, and even if sometimes people would it'd just be easier if we had a body, which is disturbing to think, but it's like that point of just certainty, and like
Mm-hmm.
for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Debilitating hope. I don't think we talk about this
Yeah.
a lot in our society, but hope
Ugh.
can sometimes be debilitating and it can sometimes stop us from accepting the reality of what is.
Yeah, that's something I've realized in the last year of my life. Just there's the fine line between hope and denial. It's a fine line, and it's hard to know what side you're on sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And when I'm working with a client who's just had grief, what I first like to do is I think it's really important to start with like remembering that person. And you'll often see this even like at funeral services. Sometimes the family will hang out afterward and tell stories and stuff. That's exactly what should be happening. So it's again, we're honoring that attachment. We're recalling the impact that person had, how they shaped us, fond memories. So that's always kind of the first or two sessions. I'm like, what were they like? What was it like to know them? And what's your favorite memory? What impact did they have on you?
mm-hmm.
I would like to start with that because that's giving space to discuss the connection.
Yeah,
Mm.
I like that.
One of we hear a lot about PTSD, post traumatic stress. A concept that I think is less known is this idea of post traumatic growth, where we can go through something that is awful, but if we're able to process it in an effective way, it can actually increase resiliency. I know that there's some
Mm-hmm.
activities that you like to do for that. You want to walk us through some of those?
Yes. One thing we learned in our supervision period or our clinical residency, so to speak, was how do we process difficult emotions and how do we build resiliency? And so we talked a bit about this in Joy Part 2 with depression and making gratitude list. But another one that we both use pretty frequently with our clients is an expressive writing exercise.
Yeah.
So, journaling for processing our difficult emotions, if we want to increase our resiliency and our optimism skills, is you write your feelings for 15 minutes. And you want to do this for 3 to 4 days in a row. During your 15 minutes, you are expressing your very deepest thoughts and feelings.
Mm. Like a brain
And
dump.
yeah, brain dump. We aren't trying to make sure our grammar is correct. It doesn't necessarily need to make sense to anybody but you. Whatever's on your mind, you're writing it down. Good way to do this is just to set a timer. When the timer dings, you kind of wrap that up. Maybe you give yourself another minute or two, or you may want to be really rigid and just say, nope, I did my 15 minutes. That's my window of tolerance, and I'm going to stop with that.
And if you don't know what to write about, you still have to write for 15 minutes, even if it's just I'm writing words on a page. I don't know what I'm really thinking. I'm just trying to get through this. It's okay to have lulls too. Just don't stop writing.
Mm-hmm. My therapist is making me do this.
I don't like this, and I.
So after you do your 15 minutes, you want to then review your writing with these certain questions in mind. First one is, why does this upset me? So if we're writing about something difficult, so for this individual here, why would the journals upset you? Or why would the family wanting the journals back? Why would that upset you? What do I need to do different? So do I have room for improvement? Is there room for growth here? How can I soothe myself? Are there things in my writing experience that are maybe within my control that I can change and affect? And that would maybe bring me some comfort or some other type of closure.
So if I was processing the emotion of pain, I would provide like emotional first aid, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, what did I learn from this? So did you learn anything new about yourself, about your perception? Maybe did you learn anything new about your relationship from this writing?
I really think like I know for me when I am especially pain. When I'm willing to feel pain and go through pain, that is where like I think the most growth comes from. I always have like, these like aha moments where I'm like, holy shit, I just gained some wisdom. You're like, no, not so much.
No, actually, I was going to agree with you, even though my facial expressions may not have led you to that conclusion. I think for me, I do experience the most growth from pain. For me, I get a lot of connections made. When I read through something that I wrote in a moment of pain, in the moment I'm just writing, right? I'm not very connected, right? I'm just focused on mind to paper. So then when I go back and reread it, I tend to reread it in my therapist's brain. And then I'll start making connections to, God, this is how I felt when I was 5 and X, Y, and Z was happening. And so then my growth comes from like, I learn insight into patterns of behavior. I'm like, where these patterns formed and how I turned out to be who I am. And are these adaptive functions for me, or is this how I just coped with a chaotic childhood?
Wow. So really you get like a lot of like self-knowledge that comes from that process.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm thinking too, as we're talking like on the frame of, post-traumatic growth. Have you heard like Viktor Frankl?
Yes.
Okay. Viktor Frankl was a psychologist who was a victim in the Holocaust, or not, he survived, but he was imprisoned at a concentration camp. And so he was observing a lot of the other prisoners going through this awful experience, and he really started focusing on suffering. And what he noticed was that the people who did the best in those concentration camps were people who were able to give meaning to suffering. So they found some sense of purpose and depth to it past just like this immediate discomfort. And so he made like a whole therapy modality out of that, talking about more like an existential a bit, talking about just finding meaning in suffering. But I think this expressive writing can be really helpful for that, because it's saying, okay, this thing that I did not prefer occurred. It deeply distressed me, but this is still really great data to have. Like, this is a rich experience in life. And so I really like to work with clients of like finding that meaning through tragedy.
Yeah.
Which is easier said than done and can take a while.
In Tuesday's episode, you referenced a Buddhist philosophy of we suffer because of attachments. I have a client who is in recovery dharma, which is kind of like AA, but it builds off of a lot of Buddhist principles. So they do a lot of meditations, a lot of mindfulness, a lot of openness to sit in your emotions. And so one little nugget he shared with me was, we suffer because we resist change.
Yeah.
So when we are going through processes like grief and loss, and we're in these parts of denial, it's causing suffering, whereas being able to accept it and to find some type of meaning or to look for areas of growth or improvement, we can decrease the suffering part. We're still going to feel pain, and that's still going to feel icky and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it feels different than suffering. Suffering to me is almost in that hopelessness, helplessness.
Yeah, this is like kind of empowering to be like, I can grow from this. Yeah. It's kind of, it's kind of like going, just floating down the stream versus swimming up the current. And I think when we try to like numb out, if we can just float down the stream, we'll get to the bank. But if we're trying to, just swim and keep ourselves afloat, it's exhausting. And sometimes just not struggling as much and just letting ourselves go through this experience in life without telling ourselves we want something different can be really relaxing, even if it is a hard thing to go through.
Yeah. I talk about window tolerance a lot with my clients. And window of tolerance is basically the amount of space we have to tolerate uncomfortability.
Yeah.
So if you think of like a pain tolerance, everybody's pain tolerance is going to be different for physical pain. Not necessarily that we want to increase that, but at least with emotional pain or those uncomfortable emotions that we sometimes have to experience as a human, we can adjust our tolerance window and increase that. And what this does is it does empower us, and we tell ourselves we can sit with this and we can get through this. So that looks like sitting in that emotion and tolerating it. So maybe we're crying for 5 minutes, and then the next time we cry for 10 minutes, and then the next time we cry for 20 minutes, and the next time we just cry until we stop naturally.
Yeah, that's what I think. Talking about that, the wave again, and referencing it from the first episode, I think a lot of my clients get scared to feel sad because it's going to feel out of control. And lots of times we just need to know that it's not going to kill us. Know that we can go into the ocean and the wave can hit us and it might feel like we're drowning, but we're not going to. It takes a while to trust that. And so lots of times when I'm encouraging a client to cry, I just say, this is what's going to happen. You are going to allow yourself to cry. It is going to be devastating. You will feel like you're going to die, and you're going to cry. You might cry really, really hard. Probably after 20 minutes, you're going to get tired and you're going to stop and you're going to be okay. And it's not going to kill you. So I want you to try that. And so I think, and I'm like, I'm a professional telling you this is safe. Right? I'm prescriptively telling you to suffer prescriptively because that's what you need to do. And you're going to be okay. I promise you. I think sometimes clients just need to know, like, it's going to be okay. I can feel this. I can feel overwhelmed and like I'm melting down and then it'll stop. But like, we don't, until we go through that, we don't know that, so I love the idea of you saying, okay, give yourself 5 minutes. Yeah, we naturally will kind of do that, right? Like give yourself 5 minutes and then 10 minutes. And like the more that we know that we can experience this and it not kill us, that's how we open up that window over time. We have to, it's like anxiety, right? We have to like start doing it to know it's okay. We can avoid it and trust that it's going to be okay if we do it because we don't have that data yet. So with the distress tolerance skills and kind of window of tolerance, are there any, so we talked about doing some of the expressive journaling, revisiting kind of how we think about grief and like the tasks that need to happen. Are there other kind of practical skills that you're giving clients to help them kind of tolerate those emotions?
One is from DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. It's an acronym called ACCEPTS, ACCEPTS. Each letter stands for a different kind of distraction tool. So we sit until we feel we've hit our window of tolerance and we can't sit any longer. Then we can pull out one of our accept skills and distract ourselves.
Okay.
If we are immediately going to our accepts, we're said to have low or no distress tolerance. We're probably using our accepts as a numbing skill. So there is a fine line between adaptive and maladaptive here. You need to attempt to sit in it for a little bit, even if it's 60 seconds. That's a starting point. The next day you need to try for 120.
Like double, because having numbing is not the correct response to sadness. Being numb does not mean that you've appropriately healed from grief.
Correct.
Yes, in a land before I wanted to be a therapist, I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so I was working at an animal clinic for a couple different summers. And at the time I thought this was so cruel, right? But they would spay and neuter animals. And the doctor was really slow, to spay a dog. It's like abdominal surgery. They cut him open. It's really invasive. It's a major surgery. And it's painful. But the vet would be really slow to prescribe pain meds. And I was upset by that. And he explains, he's like, if you give a dog medicine, they don't fake it. If they don't feel pain, they don't act like they're in pain. So if they don't have pain, they're going to jump up on the couch. They're going to run around in the yard. They're not going to know to slow down. So the medicine lets them know that they have an injury and they need to take it easy, because if we numb it out, they're just going to rip their sutures open. And I really love that, talking about how the pain's a healing emotion, because that's so true. If we're just numbing out and we're not aware that we have an injury, we're going to cause damage. And so I just really love that idea of we want to be comfortable, but not too comfortable, because then we're not going to know that we need to attend to it. So keeping in that middle ground of we're not going to wallow, because that's not really productive either. We're also not going to numb. We have to stay in the spot where we're kind of consciously aware of this boo-boo that we have and have that kind of going on so that we respond appropriately.
Yeah. It's a great analogy.
I know, right? I was like, gosh, that's so true. Yeah. Especially in modern existence, we're really comfortable. So over time, when the less and less we're suffering, the more distress we get, which is, I think we're seeing depression at all-time high, anxiety at all-time
Mhm.
high. I think it's just kind of that same idea of, well, if you don't use it, you lose it. And stress tolerance works that way too.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay. So our accepts that we're using adaptively, we have A for activities. So these are activities that are going to help you decrease the uncomfortable emotion. Notice we did not say get rid of. The goal is to kind of decrease that and keep that within our window of tolerance. So this could be some of your value congruent activities that we talked about in joy. So if you identify your values, then identify a list of value congruent activities. That's going to fit into this coping skill as well. So for me, that's going outside in the sun or reading a book, or I've been doing like the paint with numbers. So just things that we enjoy that kind of tap into our natural passion and joy. The first C is for contributing. So getting yourself out of your own internal world and focus on somebody else. So kind of giving back in that sense. And this can be small. This could be like smiling at others or giving a compliment or holding a door. This could be offering to do somebody else a favor. So it could be something really small and natural in your normal flow of your day, or this could also be something where you go out of your way to help somebody with something.
Would this also be like calling loved ones and seeing how they're doing and like checking in on your people and stuff? Would that be something different?
No, I think that would count for contributing.
Okay.
The next one is a bit tricky, so I always preface this one. It's comparisons. So again, there's a fine line between adaptive or maladaptive. So bring perspective to your current situation, right? So if you're going through heartbreak, if this is not your first heartbreak, you know you've done this before. So we're comparing it to a past experience. Last time was hard and last time sucked, but I did it and I was okay. And I obviously found love again because here I am in heartbreak again.
So like if I did it once, I can do it again. So it's like comparing against past versions of yourself.
Correct. To kind of empower.
Yeah.
The technical instructions for this, you can compare yourself to other times when you have dealt with maybe even more difficult problems than this particular one. So maybe heartbreak isn't your biggest problem. Maybe it is. The part I don't like with this one is when it says you can also compare yourself to others who struggle with even greater problems than you. And I always tell my clients, it's not a competition on who struggles the most in life. Your pain does not need to be compared to other people's pain. You're sad because you lost your dog and your best friend lost their mom. That doesn't make your grief more or less than theirs. It's different, but it's grief in its own right. Nobody's getting a trophy for suffering.
Yeah, I guess when I think of, I hear it, and I think people can get, especially with like social media comparisons, can get really rowdy. I think the natural flow of that would be like it would lead into gratitude of like, oh gosh, at least I'm not living in a place where I have, thank God I have all functioning limbs and clean drinking water and access to modern medicine. Some of that can just be, it's not that bad. I'm capable of doing a lot more, and I'm grateful that these are the problems that I have today. But I can also see it being invalidating for self.
Minimizing, or even while we would maybe want it to lead naturally into a gratitude list and something more adaptive, it could easily go into toxic positivity. Well, I shouldn't feel so sad about this because I still have all of these really great things. And you can be grateful for all these really great things and be really sad about this too.
So I would probably not, I would give this to maybe a realist to do a comparison, maybe not a pessimist or something like that, who's actually able to accurately assess without it becoming maladaptive. Just almost like taking an inventory more so than it feeling personal could maybe be productive.
Yeah. I typically will only give it to clients and cut out the second part. I'll do self-comparisons only. If think about a time when you've already gone through something like this, or think of a time when you went through something similar. Or is this the most difficult thing you experienced? No. Okay, well, let's treat this with the grief we need to treat it with and remind ourselves we've been through difficult things so we can get through this.
I had recently where I asked a client, I said, have you been through things harder than right now? And they said, no, this is the worst it's ever been. I was like, oh shit.
I
You
bet
going
that feels really scary.
yeah.
You had to
I was
switch
like, oh.
gears. Like that backfired.
But I was like, gosh, so this is understandable that you're this upset, right? Like this is the hardest time you've been through. Yeah, that did backfire. I thought for sure we'd have other experiences, but now. Oh God. Whoopsie. You don't know until you ask, right?
Correct. All right, we did ACC. E is for emotions. This is very similar to our opposite to emotions skill. So seek out activities, events, or thoughts that create feelings that are different from the ones that we're currently experiencing. So if we're feeling a loss of attachment, putting effort into current attachments is probably going to be a natural way to offset that. So if I'm reaching out to family or friends.
When I want to isolate.
P, push away. So we push away distress by mentally locking it in a box and putting it in a shelf in a locked room. I have a guided meditation that I'll use with a lot of my trauma clients. So I do have a container guided imagery. We're going to do this. If you guys have listened to anxiety, we did something very similar at the end of our anxiety. So after our summary, we will go into the script if you guys want to try that and see how that works for you. But essentially, we're taking all of our emotions that we can no longer tolerate. We put them in a box, put them up on a shelf in a closet is how DBT does it. The goal is not to leave it on the shelf. It's when we feel we're able to tolerate that, we go back to the shelf, we pull it down and we reopen it and we tolerate that. So in sessions with my clients, I'll always say, all right, we're going to leave these feelings here until our next session. And we start our session going to our container and opening that up, taking on those feelings and we process them.
So like healthy compartmentalization where we're only opening these emotions in a place that feels safe as opposed to just repression where we're just like, this is intolerable. I'm going to shove this down until it comes out involuntarily.
Yes.
And then I'll react to that at the time.
Yep.
Deliberate.
Yep. That's P, push away. T, we have thoughts. Mindfully focus on distracting thoughts. The science of this is we can only think about one thing at a time. So if we kind of hyper focus on something different, we're going to decrease the amount of time and energy we're thinking about the distressing thought.
Okay. It's a lot of even the skills that we talked about in the second part of anxiety, like even like the grounding and the mindfulness and all the reframing tools, even some.
Another one is like counting to 100. I don't think we did counting with any of our like anger management or anything like that. But if we're just focused on each number and mindfully counting, then we have less energy for our distressing thoughts.
Yeah.
This could also look like reading a magazine or book. Books are really good. You kind of lose yourself into that world.
It's like imagining it as opposed to like TV is kind of feeding you the imagery you're having to build it.
Yeah. And then lastly, S is for sensations. So this could include physical sensations like being active or working out, going for a jog. This could also be some type of like self-soothe skill. So I always tell
alliteration, self-soothe skill. So
I know.
Well done.
I always tell my clients when I worked in a call center, I would have one of those really tiny candles on my desk. And after a really difficult call or somebody would like call in and just yell and berate me, I would log out and I would just take the cap off and I would just smell my candle.
Oh, I like that. Like a little aromatherapy.
Yes. So little things that you can do to soothe yourself. Usually you're engaging your senses. So this could also be like holding an ice cube is another one that is used a lot, or warm water. You want to make sure if we have a tendency for self-harm, we're not using this maladaptively.
Yeah.
So that's my little caveat there. Know what's within your window of tolerance. If holding an ice cube or putting your hand under warm water makes you want to like put your hand under hot water, this is not the skill for you. Use a different one.
Like the sensation of cutting is not an appropriate application.
Correct.
Yeah.
Another one could be when you're listening to music, right? We're engaging our sense of sound. Sight, so if you're looking at some artwork or doing some coloring, we're engaging some senses there as well.
I like
So
that.
those are our accepts. We had activities, contributing, comparisons, emotions, pushing away, thoughts, and sensations.
I love that. So the challenge is to let yourself experience pain,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully, or maybe even cry it out. And then after that, then you're like, okay, time to use my skills,
Yes.
my accepts.
Mm-hmm.
I love that acronym.
Yep.
I
Are
think
there other skills you use with clients?
I love. I mean, this encapsulates about every kind of category of
It
coping
really did.
skill we really have. One, I don't know that I use this with pain specifically, but I'm all about something I call a restart your day ritual.
Oh,
I do that personally, and I love doing it for clients too. Mine is always a shower or like a bath. I don't know why. That's just early on. I think I was like crying one time when I was like 3 years old. My grandma was like, "What do you need?" And I was like, "I just need to take a bath." So like that really quickly. My cousin was like, "I just need to read a book." We're like the same age. So like we knew it worked for us. But I think anytime, if we feel, sometimes we wake up and we're just like, I am probably gonna feel sad all day. This is going to be a sad day. Sometimes that's reality, that radical acceptance, and sometimes we can decide we want to pivot and come up for air. And so I really love having clients identify, like, what is a restart your date ritual? This is something that you do that makes you feel like you were having a pause, putting a seal on whatever happened earlier, and then resetting intentions for what you want the rest of the day to look like. So this can look like changing your clothes when you get home from work, listening to a podcast. Maybe this is something you do on your commute. Yeah, mine's always like I call it restart my day shower. And I am really intentional that I acknowledge that the first part of the day was pretty shitty. I didn't like it. I don't want to feel that way anymore. I paid enough dues to the grief piper, and now I can go actually have a nice evening because I've done enough processing for the day. So I'm just really kind of intentional about that, of like, we're done. We're not going to cry about this anymore. I think we've done enough here today. We can rest.
I like that.
Yeah.
Showers can be really impactful. I don't know how we've missed this in our emotions to date,
Mm.
but in our field, we talk about ADL, so activities of daily living. And a lot of times when we become overwhelmed with our emotions, we tend to slide on our day-to-day activities. A lot of times this can look like we aren't showering, or we aren't cleaning our house, or we aren't, going to get groceries.
Yeah.
And so for my clients who really struggle in the grief process, or they're really deep in depression, I ask them, when's the last time you took a shower? It's like, not
Yeah.
because you look dirty, but because sometimes it's a physical washing away and like a mental washing away of
Yeah.
everything you're feeling. And there's just something so restorative,
It's
at
so
least for
cleansing.
me
I
and for
totally
a lot of my
agree.
clients. It's
Yeah.
just very restorative.
Yeah. And especially with grief, I can say I'm going throughout the day and I'm feeling tearfulness kind of welling up, but I'm like, I'm at work. I can't do that right now. We're going to kind of put this up on the shelf later. I've been really intentional of like, I'm not going to not feel sad anymore until I cry this out. I just need to cry it out. So I'll just be like, my restart my day and my sadness purge will happen at the same time. I'm going to go have a really hard cry in the shower.
Hmm.
And we're moving on, because it's like the more that I kind of shove down the tears, I know to stop having that tearfulness welling up is just let myself cry. And so I'll just kind of combine those of like, we're gonna go hash this shit out. Let's just get it done with. And I laugh at myself now, but that's like really what it was for a
Yeah.
while, and that worked for me. Yeah, warm water is very soothing.
Mm-hmm. I like that. Restart your day. It's a good skill.
Yeah, because if we're mad or stressed, it can apply to any emotion. But I think knowing what helps you feel reset, I really like clients to have that identified pretty early on.
Mm-hmm. You can pull a lot of different skills in with that also.
Yeah.
So I bought like shower steamers. It's kind of the equivalent of a bath bomb, but they have different scents, but I do a lavender one because that's really calming.
Yeah.
And so when I'm having a really rough day, I'll pull out one of my shower steamers and I'll drop it in. And I feel so calm and so relaxed. I'm
Yeah.
just ready to chill the fuck out for the rest of the night. Like
Oh
I'm
my God.
so soothed.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll be really intentional. Like, I'm going to have a mindfulness shower, especially if I have to like wash my hair, and I will do everything I
That's
can.
the opposite of my.
Because I'll be like, all right, what am I, I'm feeling the tile on my feet. I'm feeling, like really just kind of like really immersing in the process of like just hygiene, because it takes a while. And so really just kind of bringing in all this mindfulness skills, because a shower is a lot of stimulation, especially if you're combining things like aromatherapy and stuff into that, or playing music or whatever. I had a client who had some kind of like it wasn't like a candle, it was like ambient lighting kind of situation, and he would take showers in the dark but have like this light on.
Oh.
And so like, obviously like your fall risk, don't do those kinds of things, but it was a version of like almost like tucking yourself into bed but like in a shower. And so he was like, he'd be really intentional about turning on this like ambient lighting, and then just like kind of dimming down the sensory overload of the shower so he could focus on the physical sensations to kind of ground him. It's like taking out the sight a little bit. And that was really helpful for him. It sounds nice.
Yeah. Sleep hygiene is a big thing these days. And so you train your brain into these patterns and it starts to expect what comes next. So if you just keep doing the same thing over and over, and you do that enough, your brain's going to start realizing like, oh, it's time to unwind. Like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it's going to adapt.
Well, and I think especially when we're having a lot of pain, sleep gets really hard because it's exhausting. So sometimes we're having to take naps. We have a really hard cry session, and we're kind of sleeping during the day, and then we're finding ourselves laying awake at night thinking about this loss that we had. And so really, even if you don't feel like you want to have a sleep routine, starting that skill, because it's going to kind of eat your lunch a little bit. It sucks to lay there in bed and think about what you're sad about. Not fun. Those are kind of the majority. I'm just really all about crying. I can't emphasize that enough. It's so cathartic, and I just have never really found, maybe I'm projecting my own personal experience of it, but like I've just never really found a way to move through it without just letting yourself cry. I just don't know another way.
That's fair.
Yeah. I'm sure there's some dudes who say like it's not necessary, and that could be true for people. But yeah, I think a lot of people respond pretty similar to pain.
It can sometimes be hard for us to tolerate pain because we weren't allowed to experience pain as children. So there's kind of the two sets of parents, the parents who are like, you want to cry, I'll give you something to cry about, or the coddling where I need to rescue you because you can't experience this pain, or I can't allow you to experience pain, or that makes me a terrible parent.
So then we get really kind of terrified of that emotion and being in that emotional state.
Emotional intelligence is going up, and people are understanding the importance of just letting kids have their feelings.
Yeah.
But for us who didn't get that, we have to learn that as adults and let ourselves realize we can tolerate these really tough and uncomfortable emotions, and it's not going to kill us.
Yeah. It takes, our mid-30s we're learning, but it's great. No, we knew it before then, but really, yeah, we got some good test runs here lately. Yeah.
But honestly, we were 20? We did not learn the 6 core emotions till we were about 29 or 30.
Yeah, that's so true. And
we've only had this knowledge for about 5 years.
Yeah, so we got a lot of practical applications, and it's interesting being a therapist because we learn these skills, and then sometimes we get to have little dabbles of let me try this on myself. You're like, oh, that shit works. Or like, oh, I had challenges with that skill, or I applied it differently in this way. And so we get to grow a lot in our field too, because what we do for work is really useful just as a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. You're late 20s, emotions.
Where would we be without candy?
I know. Thank God we're therapists. We'd be a mess. Oh man. So we'll do just to summarize to you guys for the post. We said the author is probably not so much an asshole. He might be an asshole if he's a little bit deregulated. Yeah. The in-laws are being assholes because they're kind of overstepping boundaries into the marital relationship and being a little bit judgmental on other people's processes of grief. Yeah. Okay, so I'll summarize, and then Erica is going to take us through a guided meditation on containing, is what you call it. Containment.
Containment, yep.
Okay. So emotion neither good nor bad. The function of pain is to tell us what we are attached to, and it's a healing emotion. So to keep pain within its appropriate range. We gave you guys some tools. We first started talking about kind of revisiting the stages of grief and moving away from a 5-stage model into the 4 tasks, which again are acceptance, experiencing pain, adjustment, and then refocusing or integration. We want a sense of closure lots of times to feel like we can resolve. So having kind of these ambiguous losses can have that grief process look a lot different. There is the concept of post-traumatic growth, and optimism is a big part of resiliency, and there's actually ways to increase optimism. One of the ways that we talked about is called expressive journaling. So we recommended writing just a stream of consciousness for 15 minutes, 3 to 4 days in a row, and then asking yourself the questions or writing about them. Why does this upset me? What can I do differently? How can I soothe myself? And what did I learn? And lastly, we talked about the concept of window of distress tolerance and being able to tolerate uncomfortable emotions for longer. So we said, first, let yourself feel the feelings. And then once you've kind of maxed out, we can use our accepts tool, which is an acronym. To review those again, it is activities, contributing, comparisons, emotions, push away, thoughts, and sensations. And then we recommended a little restart your day ritual with like showers or just for the self-soothing nature, but having some kind of consistent thing that you know can help reset your emotional state whenever you need it. Did I miss anything?
No, that sounds pretty good. I think you hit it all.
Nice. Well, take us away on a journey.
Absolutely. All right, guys. We are going to do the containment guided imagery meditation. You want to make sure you are safe to do this. So we don't want to be driving, probably don't want to be at work unless you're in your own office and you can have some interrupted time. The one we did with anxiety leaves on a stream was short and sweet. It's about 5 to 7 minutes. This one is going to be a bit longer. It's been a while since I did it, but I want to say it's probably closer to 10 to 15, maybe even 20. So I'll try and keep the pauses a little bit shorter just so that I can be respectful of everybody's time, but just so you guys are aware and can plan accordingly if you're doing this quote unquote live with us, or if you need to pause and rejoin us. All right, guys, allow yourself to be comfortable, either lying down or sitting up with your back, neck, and spine fully supported. Knowing that you will not be interrupted for the next little while, begin by gently closing your eyes. Now begin to bring your attention to your breath, the direct experience of your breath, however it is and however it changes. Allow yourself to softly focus your awareness on the breath that is arising right now, the in-breath and the out-breath, the rising and the falling. If you can, try to follow one full cycle of the breath from the beginning of the in-breath through its entirety, and then to the beginning of the out-breath through its entirety. Allow yourself the time and the space to be in direct contact with the breath throughout one entire cycle. As you continue to pay attention to the breath, you may notice distractions that arise. Just allow yourself to notice those distractions, any bodily sensations or any thoughts. If possible, allow yourself to become aware of the separateness of those bodily sensations. Notice how they are separate and distinct from your thoughts, your ideas, and your words. Now, as you continued with this focused awareness, you will notice how often you lose contact with the breath. Maybe you become caught in a thought or an idea, or maybe some other bodily sensation pulls your attention. When a distraction happens, simply notice that you've lost connection to the breath and gently bring your awareness back to it. We'll begin now with a deep breath In through your nose, inhaling slowly and deeply. Exhale through pursed lips until all the air has been released. Now we are going to be creating a container. It doesn't matter what kind of container it is, as long as it can hold any and all distressing material. If you were going to develop such a container, what would it look like? Some people have used boxes, safes, trunks, or chests. Others have used book bags or other pieces of luggage. It can be anything really: a tank, a submarine, anything that suits you. Can you bring to mind an image of something like that? Something that would be able to contain any and all distressing material. When you have one in mind, take a good look at it. Notice what material it is made out of, how it's being held together, how big it is, what color it is, and any markings that may be on it. If there are markings, just notice them. If not, that's okay too. I'd like you to add something to your container. I'd like you to add in some way, whether it be a note, a sign, or an inscription, something to indicate that this container will remain tightly sealed. It will remain tightly sealed until you wish to open it and retrieve something from inside. Otherwise, it stays sealed. It can be opened, but only by you, and it should only be opened in the service of your healing. So once again, look at your container. Does it already have that message on it? If not, place one on there now. Now, how does your container open? Can you open it by yourself, or do you need help? Is there a lock on there? If not, feel free to put one or several on there now. Once the locks are in place, we'll experiment with opening and closing them, locking and unlocking them. As you do that, notice how much or how little effort it takes to open and close your container. When you feel comfortable, I'd like you to think of something that you might put into your container just for practice. Do whatever is necessary to open it up and then place something in there. When I say something, I mean anything really that may be distressing or disturbing to you in this moment. It could be a thought or a worry, uncomfortable emotions, or bad memories. It could be something that you need to get done, but just not right this minute. Or it could be something that keeps you from being present with this exercise. It could be self-judgment, doubt, or even pain. Whatever it is, you're going to put into the container. Whatever you need to do to get it in there, do that now. Once the material is in, close it up and lock the container. Now breathe deeply as you look at the locked container, securely holding anything that you need or want it to hold. Notice how you feel in your body, having set aside whatever distressing things you put in your container. Can you sense that it is fully contained? Is there something that keeps it from feeling fully contained? If so, can we try opening your container and putting that in there as well? Remember that this container is yours, and it will hold anything and everything you need it to hold for as long as you need it to. Now imagine walking away from your container so that it is no longer in your sight. Notice the feeling in your body now that you are no longer burdened by what you've put in the container. Notice your breath, the in breath and the out breath, and any sensations you may feel in your body. Maybe your shoulders have dropped a bit, or some of the tension in your neck has subsided. Whatever feelings you may notice, breathe deeply and just notice them. Whatever you put in the container is now securely locked inside. It is for you to open whenever you wish to put things in or take them out. So now, just for practice, let's go back to your container. Once you have your container in sight, look closely at it. See if you can read the inscription that's written on the outside. Continue focusing on your breath. When you are within reach, unlock your container and open it up. As you open it, notice that what you put in there is still there, separate from you. While you're here, you might want to put something else in, or maybe even a few things. Or you may just wish to lock it back up. Whatever feels right and safe to you, do that now. And once you've finished practicing putting things in your container and securely locking it back up, you can walk away from your container. Know that this resource, this secure container, is available to you at any time. Know that you can use it to hold any and all distressing things. Know that all the things that you have chosen, or anything that you choose to contain in the future, will be secure and will remain secure. You can access the material whenever you feel ready to do so, but for now, you may leave it, knowing it is safely and securely contained. I'll gently bring your awareness back to the room by counting up from 1 to 5. When I reach the number 5, your eyes will gently open. You'll be awake and alert and feeling only peace. 1, 2, 3. Take a deep breath. 4 and 5. All right, guys. That was the containment imagery. Just you were following along. What was that experience like?
I haven't done that one. The first time when you went through it quickly, it was a clear cube. This time it was a canoe, and I had
Okay.
this like white rope, like braided system, like this green tarp, like covering it, and it said, "It's okay to enter. Open when you're ready." And the first thing I dropped in there was a dead cockroach, and I was like, "Okay, I'm afraid of bugs." Like came to my mind first, but then I was like, you know what? I've been doing a lot of like guilting myself and like self judgment. It was hard to kind of like imagine what the emotion would look like outside of my body, but eventually it kind of became this like black sludge kind of stuff that was in there. So I was mentally like, a canoe's gigantic. Where could I put it? So when you're thinking about revisiting it, like, is it in the garage? I don't know where to find it. But I didn't like the first image that came to my head. I wanted to let myself go with that and not overthink it. So I was like, weird that it was a canoe, but that's where my brain went. Which you can also sit in a canoe, which, interesting. But
Yeah.
I did when you said how would it, what's it feel like to have that emotion? I was like, I feel kind of energized and kind of like excited. If I didn't have that self-judgment, I would probably feel pretty good today. And I noticed that. And then you said putting it away, when I was kind of waking up, I kind of set an intention of like, I want to be really intentional for the rest of the evening to not revisit those thoughts. Was kind of what I was doing on that count up.
I like that.
Yeah. I thought you might ask me, so I was noticing my observations. Noticing my experiences, but yeah. First, I was like, kind of like, what the fuck? I was like curious about myself, but I was like, we're just gonna roll with it. That's first thought, right thought,
Yeah.
Yeah, that was
That's
relaxing.
great.
I felt energized.
Yeah. So that's the containment imagery script. That's what we have for you on pain. We would love to hear your thoughts, questions with pain, any of our coping skills, or any of the other emotions we've done to date. You can reach us on Instagram at Assertive Podcast, or send those thoughts to assertivepodcast@gmail.com. Until next time.